bad.
What's up? What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Rendes, and a great episode for you today. Today we have legendary Infowars host and producer. He's been with the company since just about the beginning and really is an important part of the Infowars story and one of the reasons why it runs so smoothly and successfully today. And who I'm talking about is Rob Dew. If you're a longtime Infowars listener, there's no way you don't know who Rob Dew is. And it was truly a pleasure to learn a lot more about his background, his upbringing, and some of his origin story. And then we get into some of the current events. So it's a fun discussion. I know you're going to enjoy this. But as always, I have to remind you, this is a Valley for Valley show. If you get some value out of the discussions I bring to you and the guests I bring to you, obviously this takes time out of my day, edit, scheduling, recording, uploading, thumbnails, etc. There's a lot of things that go into running a podcast. And if you appreciate the time and effort I put into this, consider rating, reviewing, leaving comments. That helps with the algorithms. Also, subscribe to the show on whatever audio or video platform you watch or listen to the show. Then, of course, if you can financially help the show, there's tons of ways of doing so. You can send a one-time donation via PayPal or Venmo. You can help us monthly on Patreon. We have a merch store with tons of Ripple Effect Podcasts, merch, and new designs. We also have some Theory 6 stuff on there, some Union of Unwanted stuff on there. So please check out the show description or the rippleeffectpodcast.com for all these links and much more. You can also purchase, stream, and download Theory 6 music, which is the music you hear during the podcast. The theme song to the podcast is called The Ripple Effect on the album called The Ripple Effect by Theory 6. But I have a new album called Artificial Ripple. It's an EP that just came out and it's available everywhere. If you like new metal, if you like metalcore, post-hardcore, if you like industrial or EDM, check out Theory 6 Music. It's a combination of all that. And make sure to follow Theory 6 Music on Spotify and other platforms because I'm always releasing new music. And if you like the music, check out some Theory 6 merch. That's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation with legendary producer and host from Infowars, Rob Dew, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.
Okay, thank you. My life, I guess, started off in Louisiana. That's where I was born and raised. I would say till I was 16. Had a very, I think, amazing childhood. Had great parents. I had an older brother, or older sister, younger brother, and just lived the life where we went riding on our bikes every day, playing until we couldn't do it anymore. Drinking out of the water hose. In fact, one time my mom, off a mail order catalog, bought this water fountain attachment for our hose. So you would plug that in and then stick the hose in that, and then we had a little water fountain that we could have because as we were always drinking out of the hose, and that was normal. Like, it was normal not to be in your house. Now, if I punish my kids, it's like, don't go to your room. You have to sit down here with us, Whereas, when I was a kid, like, you didn't want to be sent to your room. But now, you have the portal that can take you wherever you want. But so I did 2 years of high school there, played soccer, played baseball, a little bit of basketball, a little bit of football. And then when I moved up, my dad got transferred, so I finished high school right outside of Pittsburgh, and so got a whole new set of friends up there, and finished high school there. Then went to college at WVU eventually. But I did a semester or a year at Penn State, a branch campus, and that's where I went out for the team. I'm like, I'm going to go out for the basketball team, and I was playing tennis as well, so I played on the tennis team there. But I played in high school soccer and tennis. I lettered in both of those. And then I went out for the basketball team because I'd always played basketball, but like I always felt, the teams are smaller for basketball, and if like you're not in, you're not in, and I was not in with the coaches at the new school. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not even going to try out. But then I did in college, and I made the team. And what happened was a bunch of guys started quitting. So I was probably going to be one of the lower men on the depth. But then by the time Christmas rolls around, I'm like second off the bench. Then I'm first off the bench. And then I'm starting. And because then there was only six of us, because two guys became academically ineligible. And so I started several games. I think my best game was like 12 points and like 8 rebounds. It was a pretty good game. It was a playoff game, and where we all the branch campuses of Penn State played each other, and then the East and West met. So we went to the finals, and we lost, but we were playing a team that was a lot bigger than us and a lot more skill. And right after that, I did a semester at WVU, and then I took off and did like kind of took a break from school and worked a semester in Switzerland on a ski resort, that was probably one of the biggest learning experiences of my life, because I always thought people were nice, and just in general. And the lady who brought us up there was very nice. But then, a few weeks up in the mountains on the lodge, well, she develops this, drinking problem, and so she starts calling us stupid Americans and lazy and this and that. And we're getting up every morning shoveling snow off the porch and move. The Swiss make very heavy furniture, so everything's heavy. We got these benches and tables. We're setting out every day and then picking them back up. And then we're busting tables all day till the lodge closes. And we live on the lodge, like in the basement, which was pretty cool. They had one thing I remember was the floorboards were always warm because all the hot water ran underneath the floorboards. So it's an excellent way to heat. There's no other heat, like blowing on you. It was just nice, warm, radiant heat from the floorboards. And so I finished that stint. I tore my ACL there while I was skiing, and then at about that time, I'd kind of been into music. I'd play keyboards and I had a bass, but I wasn't really serious about it. But now I'm looking at 6 months without walking. And before that, I was working at a Girl Scout camp that summer to try and make some money. I was a cook at a Girl Scout camp, and then I went to right before I got surgery. I went to Woodstock '94. Had my Saab turbo. Called some friends. None of my friends wanted to go, but then this younger girl who's in my grades, who's like, she kind of hung out with the older people. So I was like, she wants to go. And I said, you really want to go? And she's like, yeah. And so we talked to her mom, made sure it was okay, because I think she was still in high school. And her mom's like, yeah, that's fine. So we both took off to Woodstock, had a great time there. God, feels like it was so long ago. I was taking film pictures from the event. But we would get up there, and basically we didn't drink any water or anything, just so we wouldn't have to go to the bathroom, because you could not, leave. It was so crowded with people, and the music was great, and there wasn't much craziness that year. It got crazy in 2000, but '94 was pretty awesome. Um, and then go back, get surgery, and then I start playing bass guitar, and I took lessons from a jazz player named Frank Marigliano, who's still teaching more or less up in Pittsburgh. And then I went back into college and started jamming with guys and formed some bands. And I was in a couple different bands there. Ended up doing a CD with one of them, and finished college. I was a theater major. Wrote some plays, produced some plays. So I guess one thing, when you're looking at the system at school was you just do what the theater professors want you to do. And me and like two other guys who were also writers were like, we should just do our own stuff in the basement theater. They had this nice little basement theater that nobody used. They would use it for acting classes. And we're like, man, it's got everything we need. So we started putting on productions, and I did two of them there, a longer one act play, and then three short plays that were all together and kind of congruent. And we were just down there producing really cool. Like I thought it was way better than the crap we were reading, like Bertolt Brecht and the Three Sisters, and Stanislav, or no, Chekhov, just like really long kind of. You really had to pay attention to these reports. They weren't, to me, they didn't speak to me culturally. So I was like, we got to do something, about about us, what we're going through. And no one cares about 17th century or 18th century Russia, honestly. No one did at the time. And maybe could have learned something and have it relate to what's going on now. But so finished up there, moved back in with my parents who had since moved back to Louisiana, and then I moved to Austin. I went and visited my cousin, and I'm like, shit, I'm moving here. This was like 98. So it was like Austin was bumping, but there wasn't that much traffic, and they didn't have all the bike lanes everywhere, so you could still kind of drive around the city. And formed some bands there, played in a few bands, ended up doing 3 CDs with one band, and kind of put away, once I started having kids, I kind of put away music for a while, but I'm getting back into it again. I mean, I still play, uh, but I put it away as a serious thing after the second, maybe the third child was born, second child. So I got 4 kids now. I'm a basketball coach. It's a lot of fun. We have good times. We go camping a lot, and snowboarding became a passion going into Switzerland and not doing it for a while. And then, working at Infowars for a few years, I finally started making a little bit of money and it was steady. So I'm like, hey, I could start going to snowboarding again. So I've been doing that, trying to take a winter adventure every year. And it gets more expensive. I don't know if I'm able to do it next year because everything's just getting ridiculously expensive. Um, but it's fun, and I take a couple of the boys with me. I used to take the oldest one and the middle one. Now I'm taking the middle one and the younger one, and then eventually it'll just be the 2 youngest ones are a boy and a girl, and I call them the Grunions, and they're fun. So yeah, it's just trying to keep everything going, and then helping keep Infowars on the air and running it and making videos for Alex, and that started in '09. Actually '08, I answered a Craigslist ad, and after I was working a bunch of different jobs. I've always been a video guy, kind of self-taught, and then I got a job at a company, a Japanese semiconductor company, and I made training videos there. And then I jumped off and was a producer at a jewelry place called the Jewelry Channel, which was selling jewelry to techno music. It was falling auction. So they're like, here's this Tanzanite. It's $1,000, and then you put it down, and then we drop the price to $500, and you see who's going to buy it. So, and then every time you drop the price, you hit the techno button. It was like, these people are like, look at this Tanzanite, and you're watching it glitter in the sun. And there's an interesting, I learned an interesting lesson about breaking news there. We had this guy, Dan Dennis, who was, he was from the QVC world, big guy, really boisterous. Yeah, he's talking like this. And he always liked working with my crew because we were fast and we were always boom, boom, boom. We're getting auctions going and we're making money. And he's selling emeralds, and we see somebody comes in and goes, hey, the Tanzanite mine flooded. And there's like only one mine in Tanzania where they get Tanzanite. You probably don't even know this. You're going to learn a lot about Tanzanite. And it's this purple, it comes out gray, but then they heat it and it turns a real beautiful purple. And so we print it out. And while we're playing one of the little video snippets in between an auction, I hand Dan the thing, and he reads and he goes, oh, wow. Oh, okay. He goes, tell the boys to start grabbing Tanzanite out of the vault, because we did the Emerald Hour, and we were actually going into a Tanzanite hour. Crazy enough. So he reads this literally during the last auction. He reads about the Tanzanite mine flood and people dying, and he goes, folks, they don't know when the mine's going to open up. This changes everything. Coming up next hour, Tanzanite, and boom, we start selling. I mean, we sold so much. I think we broke records because people were just like, "Oh, it could be a shortage," which is, how you see this supply and it was like a big lesson in supply and demand, and like sort of like how you see was the NFTs. People were like trying to buy NFTs and scoop them up, and oh, this one's good, this one's good. It was like that with Tanzanite for 2 hour period. We were just going nuts selling stuff, and then like the other host came in, and she was also a QVC alum, and she's like, I need some Tanzanite too. I need it, because she saw the money we were making. You could just see the claws coming out on these people, like wanting to make money. And I would put a gemstone up for $4,500. Somebody would buy it before I'd even drop the price. So then I had the choice: do I want to, screw these people, make money, or give them a crazy deal? Well, I kind of went in between make money and a crazy deal. Like, crazy deal was was maybe $1,000. I'd charge them 2,000 or 1,500, whatever. Just and so we were making really good profit margins. But it kind of taught me, you know, about seizing the moment as well. You know, there's a lot of things there that Alex has kind of reinforced too, working here. But during that time, I answered a Craigslist ad, and I'd been listening to Alex Jones since like I don't know, probably '99. As soon as I got to Austin, he was on Access TV, and I'd already read a couple books. I'd gotten them at this bookstore, this used bookstore. I was just walking around. There was a conspiracy section, so I'm immediately like, "Oh yeah, let's see what's in there." And I got None Dare Call It Conspiracy and Who Runs Congress. And Who Runs Congress was written by Ralph Nader, and None Dare Call It Conspiracy was like Gary Allen and some other guy I can't remember at this time. But one was more centered, you know, like global politics and how socialism and communism works. And then Who Runs Congress was like literally about how they're screwing you in Congress and doing different things just to screw people. And and so it was really it was a good education reading those books. And then when I started hearing Alex, I'm like, oh man, this is what I was reading about like 2 years ago. And now I'm hearing a guy talking about this. This is cool because nobody talked like this. You know, Rush Limbaugh, I didn't really wasn't really into Rush Limbaugh. I'd see him on my dad would be like, you want to watch Rush? I'm like, nah, I don't really want to watch Rush. He's kind of, I didn't trust him because he was in a suit. Honestly, I was at that stage where I'm like, I don't trust people in suits, because they're trying to shyster you in some way. And so I went through that phase, and I started Infowars in '09, February 9th, '09. So I might make it to 17 years before they shut the doors here coming up. We don't have an exact date, but we're thinking it's going to be sometime in January. The receivers says he's going to do an auction, so we don't know. But it's an interesting set of circumstances where we find ourselves now with all the years of going through that. And one thing is interesting with Infowars is how the media landscape changed. When I first started, we would go out and shoot 3-hour interviews with people, bring those back. We'd edit them up, and half the time the full interview would never be seen. We'd just take parts and put them in documentaries. And then we're like, wow, we got all these great interviews. Why don't we put them out and put some B-roll on them? And so then we started doing that. And then around the Ferguson stuff started happening, and then we started buying these little encoders that would encode to the web off G4 technology. And we go there and stream for an hour and 10 minutes at a time because that's all the battery was good for. And so we'd stream these hour and 10-minute streams on like Ustream and Livestream. And I don't even know if we were putting them on YouTube yet. I don't even think YouTube was live streaming. So it was like Ustream and Livestream. And we put these things out, and they get millions of views, like especially at Ferguson. Like every night would pop off. As soon as it would get dark, people come out and they start vandalizing, and the cops would come in and trying to get people. And so that was like the first change in the news, going from like, well, we're producing stuff and it takes a while, and we could get like 3 days on a report, to now it's more immediate live streams, long form live streams. And that went till the Trump administration. Well, not the Trump, when he was running, and we were going around and we would shoot quick things and put them out on X. I think you can only do 2 minutes at a time, 2 minutes, 15 seconds. So you'd have to like shoot a bit and then like find where it's at. We would do this 2 phone thing. So while one was uploading, you'd be shooting on another phone. So you're just constantly moving phones. And then I started to develop this thing called the Warhammer, which was a chicken foot monopod. And the chicken foot's got 3 legs at the bottom, so you can kind of stand it up. And then I had it attached where I could put it on a vest, but it would have two phones and a zoom camera on it. So I'd have 3 different cameras while I was going around, so you could get pretty much anything. So there'd be a debate going on, and I'd have one of the phones on the person, another one streaming live, and then I would go back and forth on the zoom camera, getting a close up of each person talking. So then it could be edited down if something good came out of it. So we ended up shooting a lot of footage then, but then that was more like, tidbits of little nuggets, info nuggets were, getting put out at that point. And then now everything's live all the time. It just seems like just live, 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 live. And so we do, 10 hours of live shows every day here. And we've been doing it since September 2016, I think we started the all three shows, and they've changed names. We've had people come and go, and the info war. It's hard to stay in the info war for especially every day. It could be a grind. Alex does it, but people they do these shows, and it kind of wears on you after a while. And I could see why people want, and a lot of it is people want instant gratification with stuff, especially watching Trump and some of the stuff he's doing, and but like today, now he just said release all the Epstein files. Are we going to get them? Who knows? I mean, what do you think? You think we're going to see anything with Epstein?
Well, do we want to go down that rabbit hole right away? Because yeah, I mean, I have my own theories on what's going on with the Charlie Kirk assassination, the links to Mossad. I mean,
Yeah,
you go
yeah.
back, historically, they're just Mossad has seemed to have their hand involved with so many world events. I mean, just the historical things of assassinations, in Iran and just all over the place, political assassinations, since I mean, the 50s, 60s, as long as they've been around, they've been involved in assassinations and they seem really good at it.
Hmm.
Blackmailing, that it seems to be a huge part of what they do also. Obviously, there's links, even though people deny the strong links to Mossad with Jeffrey Epstein. But obviously, Ghislaine Maxwell, her dad, was a Mossad spy. I think that's kind of it's debated a little bit, but I think for the most part, any open-minded person can see there's some serious links there. It seems like if you look at the fact that every politician, regardless what they disagree on or how much they disagree on things, the one thing that they would always agree on is funding Israel and backing their wars. It was a little bit. It was even growing up, I would always think like, okay, why is this, right? Because I mean, that's the reason why we get into the work that we're into. It was I always like to go against the grain, and when something didn't make sense, I was
Yeah.
afraid of asking questions, and that's one thing I've always really appreciated with Alex is that he was at Waco. I mean, people don't realize he's a OG. I mean, he was at Waco protesting what was going on there. I mean, this guy has been around forever. He's been called a lunatic for years and years and years and years. Luckily he is alive to see those,
Hmm.
things change and throughout history. I mean, that seems to be the recurring theme anyways. I mean, anybody who goes against the grain ends up being called a crazy person at first and eventually ends up being celebrated as somebody who was way ahead of their time. And I think even with Alex, there's a very good chance that I think that's happening, but I think there's a very good chance even later we're going to reflect on some of the work you guys have done with Infowars and just say, like, wow, like they were way ahead of their time. They fought when it wasn't easy to fight. That's why a lot of people in our community get mad at Tucker or Candace or all these people now who are talking about vaccines and are now talking about
Right.
11. And, people in our community say, oh, well, they're doing it now when it's easy. When it was
It's easy
difficult,
and safe. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's easy and safe. But, I always say, I'm like, I want to build bridges, not burn them. And
Sure.
anybody who can reach out to a different audience and help kind of plant the seed of doubt on any big topic, why not let them plant it with us, and if we have the same enemy, then we're friends regardless if we disagree on things. And
Yeah.
I think there's, and you saw with 9/11, you see with the JFK assassination, you see it with OKC, you see it with so many big events throughout history that there's this infighting ends up being counterproductive, right? It's like, oh, well, I think no planes hit the towers. Well, I think, it's like, okay, well, let's talk about what we know. And then
Right.
let's
Yeah.
talk about, one thing we definitely know is that we were lied to, and a this was a false flag. Yeah, we can argue who was behind it, who had the most influence, who had the most to gain, all these things. But at the end of the day, like, let's just focus on the fact that, like, us infighting only makes our neighbor the enemy, instead of realizing that, like, the elites and the ones pulling the string should be where our focus and energy should be going. And I think, Infowars has done some amazing, amazing work of really making, like, they started the ripple. Like, I called the show the Ripple Effect because it was named after a song I wrote called The Ripple Effect. And it was this idea that I truly believe that we can all have a impact. Somebody listening to this conversation is making a impact just by asking maybe a friend of theirs or a relative, like, hey, were your kids vaccinated? Hey, what do you think about 9/11? Hey, what do you, like, you're just planting the seed, and you never know, with the help of your own pushing these conversations onto your friends, like that help with maybe running into an Infowars documentary, and then running into this podcast or that
Hmm.
documentary or whatever. Like all these little things contribute to what eventually ends up becoming a much bigger ripple, and we can all have a impact. But yeah, I mean, to make a long story short, I think that the politicians, when you look at Jeffrey Epstein and you look at the amount of how arrogant he was, how confident he always was. I mean, when he was being interrogated, that video, I mean, he just didn't seem like he cared or thought he was going to get in trouble at all. He looked like the mobster who knows that he's being, that he's going to be taken care of, and that,
Right.
you know,
And
and
and I think the question is still out. Did he really die? Was that him, or was that a different body they were pulling out? I mean, I'm open to the fact that they may not have killed him. And that's why my song "Jeffrey Epstein Didn't Kill Himself" will go either way. If they didn't kill him and he's alive, well, he didn't kill himself. And if he was murdered, he didn't kill himself. So I've cornered the market on which way it could go. So that anytime somebody's like, "Well, you wrote the song, he didn't kill himself," well, he might not have. He might still be alive. We don't know that. We don't know. One thing I don't trust is Bill Barr, 100% on that. But I want to go back to something you were saying earlier, like the ripple effect. You don't know. Probably one of the most profound things about abortion came out of Louis Farrakhan's mouth that I ever heard. And he said, the cure for cancer is inside the womb of a woman. And I'm like, because you never know that child that's going to be born is going to come up with the cure for cancer, or it's already been done. Who knows? But it came out, whatever happens, it's always going to come from the womb of a woman, no matter what. That's where the solutions to all our problems will come from. And I really thought on that. It's really stuck with me. We went up there and interviewed Alex interviewed him in early 2016 in Phoenix, and then we had like a 3 hour dinner with him, and it was surreal. It was so long. But I really had a new appreciation because I've always kind of been, I wouldn't say anti-Muslim, but like anti letting Muslims kind of create their own government here and, Sharia law. But listening to him and listening to, the Black Islamic movement, which is a little different than the Arabic one. It's a little more, I think it's a little more based in reality. Um, Based in Western civilization. It's like, how can we do something here, based in Western civilization? But it's interesting though. All the guys sat at the table, the women and the children sat at another table. That was one of the interesting things about the dinner. I think there's actually two tables in one room and another table in another room. But it was a big group of people. And mostly they wanted to know, how do you make your money, Mr. Jones? That's what they wanted to know. He's like, well, I sell supplements. And they're like, no, but how do you make your money? He's like, well, I talk to the people. And, I don't think a lot of people appreciate how big Alex's audience is, because on top of the numbers he used to get on YouTube and all that other stuff, there was a terrestrial audience who was picking this up. And then an audience of like me, myself, I was listening to him on the audio on Infowars, just listening to the show. And I just have it on, put on the headphones while I'm editing, and oh, okay, I like this part of the interview. I'm gonna listen to this part of the show again. I'd probably listen to each show, one or two times, and getting that, like, oh, this is good information. Colloidal silver, I learned from Alex Jones and bought my first silver generator from one of his guides, and then moved up to the silver lungs generator, which is even better for people who are interested in, like, self-help, especially when you have little kids, and they get runny noses. Shoot some silver up their nose and cleans them out pretty good, and it doesn't last long in terms of being sick. And you don't have to go to a doctor every time you get antibiotics. So that's one of the cool parts about doing that. But then, going back to Epstein, yeah, there's it's been this kind of chew toy for everybody to fight with. And it really has, but most people weren't talking about Epstein when Alex was talking about Epstein. They didn't know. And now it's like, oh, now we have to get these. And we know that's a big dog and pony show. They don't really want everything released. They just want to pretend they want to use, it's like abortion. They don't really want to get, the Democrats don't want to get rid of abortion. They just want to use it as a tool, a punching bag, a thing they can direct people's anger towards. So that's what Epstein becomes. It's like, look, Trump was with Epstein. Trump was with Epstein, which I think, we already knew him and Epstein had a relationship for a time, and then it ended. But we don't know. Do we know everything? I don't know. Are there videos of Trump at his place? I don't know. That'd be interesting to see if there is. Because at this point, I had a really good caller wrap it all up today. In fact, I got to find that call and put it out. And it's like, hey, if Trump's involved, let the chips fall where they may. It's not our fault that he's involved. We can defend him, but if he's involved, then everybody who's involved needs to go down. And maybe that was, maybe in the end that was Trump's purpose, is to bring down the whole system if that really happens. But I also don't believe that the system's going to fall so easily. It's very entrenched. We saw Kash Patel and Diane Bongino get captured by the system in that first interview. You could tell those two are captured and captured individuals. That's my feeling.
Oh no, I agree with you 100%. And I gave a long-winded answer to your question, but basically I think everybody is blackmailed by
Hmm.
Assad. I think, and
Yeah.
I don't think just blackmailed. I think they're threatened and they're
Yeah.
afraid. I mean, Bibi's the only one who comes to town, and Trump doesn't come off like he wants to be the alpha male in the room. And it's rare for him to act like that. I mean, and then the fact that, the ceasefire, that hot mic moment where Trump's like, these fucking guys don't know what the hell they're doing or whatever. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it was kind of a glimpse of like, publicly he's trying to, do the politician thing, but it was like,
Right.
Trump will be honest at times, for better or worse. He won't stray. Sorry, my Pro Tools just made a noise.
Time to update.
But Trump doesn't, I think that's why I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there's some link between the Trump assassination and the Charlie Kirk assassination, because I think that having somebody in power like Trump, who is a wild card, he's not as easy to control, and he's
Yeah.
not easy. He will just say things off the cuff like that, right? And so I think that, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying that there is a link there. One thing that they do have in common is the fact that they were being told that it's just a lone assassin, and throughout history we know that it's never just a lone assassin. Sean Stone, who's a friend of mine, obviously I know he's been on Infowars a bunch too,
Hmm.
great guy. He was on Piers Morgan soon after the Charlie Kirk assassination, and I remember him and his dad talking about this with Piers Morgan. They're like, hey, what do you think about the Charlie Kirk assassination? And he's like, well, it just happened, so I'm not sure, I don't have a strong opinion. But he's like, historically, knowing what we know is that the the mainstream narrative is always it was a lone assassin, and then as time goes by, we always find out it's never a lone assassin. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're going to find out. I mean, I give Candace a lot of credit for going hard in the paint on this topic and not being afraid of saying what she's saying, and she's getting a lot of attention because of it, and I'm glad she is, because if what we think might have happened actually happened, we could be possibly looking at a coup right in front of our eyes. Like,
Hmm.
well, basically, it was a message to everyone who goes against this, this plan, this, goes against whatever they're trying to accomplish, the Zionists, like, hey, you know what? You mess with us, this is what's going to happen. And as people like you and I who are outspoken, aren't afraid to ask questions, and because I never claim to know anything, I will go down any avenue. I've had, you know, Marxists on, I've had libertarians on, I've had people who think this of the JFK assassination, people who think that of the JFK assassination. Like, I'm willing to go down any rabbit hole and ask those questions. And what they did is they made us afraid to ask questions. It's almost like, well, if
Sure.
Charlie
Yeah.
Kirk, how much different are we than him in regards to just being, somebody who puts our opinions online? And it was a bit, scary, and it makes you wonder if people are gonna, maybe self-censor a little bit. And that's the world we live in. But it seems like, and you look like the BB Files, that documentary that was banned all over the place. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I have not seen it. No.
Yeah, so
I'll check it out.
The BB Files was out. prior to October 7th and the Charlie Kirk assassination. And then, weirdly enough, when all this stuff happens, all of a sudden, in every country in the world, you go to Amazon Prime and it says the BB Files is not available in your country. So it wasn't
Yeah,
available anywhere. And it goes into his history of corruption, him, his wife, everybody around him. I mean, people don't realize that Israel was ready for a civil war. And when was Bush Jr.'s highest approval rating? After September 11th, when a
sure. Yeah,
tragic thing happens like that, it brings a nation together. And that's kind of what's happening in Israel, is that he has bought himself time with October 7th. And the fact that Charlie Kirk was even asking questions about October 7th, like that was huge, because a lot of his money was for Turning Point USA was coming from people who were pro-Israel. And
hmm,
I think Charlie Kirk was pro-Israel, but he was pro-Israel, but America first. The unfortunate thing, like all these people who are America first, a lot of them are America first, unless we're talking about Israel, then their interests and their needs and wants are more important than ours. And I think that's what's being exposed. And when you look at like the left has historically been very, pro Palestine. So obviously Israel doesn't have a lot of their support. And then if you have Charlie Kirk, who has the young conservative right influence, and he's asking questions. I mean, I'm kind of just predicting like what would happen if he was still alive and he started asking those questions. And the next thing you know, you have the young lefties and the young conservatives, and neither of them are pro-Israel. It's just a matter of time before those young people are the people in power, and then Israel has less influence. So I wonder if that was something that they were worried about, if that was something that, and again, we don't know what happened, but we do know there's a cover up. I mean, the autopsy, nothing makes sense with the story.
yeah.
In regards to them taking apart the gun, put it. I mean, I had Craig Solomon Sawyer on the Union of Dunwoody.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, I
he's
had him
good.
on. Yeah, he's awesome. But so
Yeah.
he's been on the show a bunch, but I had him on right after the Charlie Kirk assassination on the You Done Wanted. Obviously, he's shot a gun or two. I'm like, there's
Hmm.
no way that can be a entry wound. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. He's like, it's either an exit wound or that was not the gun. Like it was, it can't be both, and so the whole thing, I mean, what's your personal opinion on everything? Like one thing I will say just before I give the floor to you, because I've already been
Hmm.
talking for too long. But I figured, hey, you've done a long show today. Maybe you don't mind the break. But is the fact that I think Alex gets a lot of shit for, oh, he's pro-Israel. He's pro-Israel. He never and it's like if you watch the show, he has plenty of people who push back on Israel, and that's their topic. That's
Hmm.
their focus on the show all the time. And just because you don't necessarily agree with somebody doesn't mean that he's like, completely in the other direction, or he's bought and paid for or whatever. I mean, if he was trying to get rich, saying that 9/11 was an inside job before it was, fashionable to do so. He picked the wrong career path to get rich. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously, you guys have done great, but I think you guys have done great until now, because you guys were one of the few people who were willing to push back and say the unpopular thing, regardless, if it meant you're going to get censored, if you're going to get shadow banned or whatnot. On this specific topic, like what's your personal opinions? And obviously, we know you don't speak for all of Infowars. This is just
sure.
your
Yeah,
personal
yeah.
opinion. But
Well, looking at, I watched I watched a 2 hour documentary. I guess it wasn't a documentary; it was an interview over the weekend and it was a guy who had gone through all the financials of Turning Point and the three other companies that are associated with them. One of them's an endowment fund, or an endowment fund, TP Action, and then something else. But he was showing that, out of these entities, Charlie Kirk would have a salary, basically say like 1.6 million, but then it would be perfectly divided between these four companies. So he'd be getting paid from each one. Well, an endowment fund, he's not a financial advisor. Why would he be getting paid from that? And then some of these corp companies, they would get like $8 million from Turning Point, and then they wouldn't put that companies, they had the Turning Point financials out, but the three other companies had no financials, so you didn't even know what they're at from last year. They didn't even put theirs out. where the years before they had them all out. So something's going on with this year. Something happened, but like this 8 million went to this account and it's being paid out to, it has no employees yet. Their highest expenditure is for salaries. So, I mean, there's something going on with the financials and Turning Point, which makes sense. You got this river of money flowing in from donors. Um, and when you're spending it's easy to spend other people's money. It's very easy to get money and just, no budget and you're just going and going and going. But, they cut 33% of their staff and then their salaries went up, So it's like things that don't make sense on the front, just from looking at it. Okay, they don't make sense. They bring up more questions. So he had put that memo out saying we got to look into it. We got to do a Doge-like investigation and Turning Point because he wanted to look at the money. Because like one year they brought in 61 million, and at the end of the year they only had 5 million in the bank. Well, that's probably not good. If you're pulling in that much money, you might want to have a little more. Still, 5 million is a lot of money. But they're cutting their staff. The salaries are going up. You've got Tyler, I think he's Bauer or Boyer, whatever his name is. He was telling people, go look at our financials. And then people were looking at him like, dude, you're getting paid also from these companies the same way Charlie is. They would just take your salary and then divide it up perfectly into three, where that's kind of weird because usually you would be doing something different for another company. You'd be getting a different salary, but this is exactly the same. That to me goes, well, it needs, they need to answer for that at least because they're taking, other people's money and they're a nonprofit. So they have some accountability to the American taxpayer because they're not paying taxes. So they're kind of a burden on us. We're allowing them to operate like that. But I think what we're going to find is that it's just some sort of, there's going to be some sort of money laundering going on in this, and people that are getting paid that aren't even maybe real people or aren't doing any work and getting paid for it. And just to be, because they're part of the group, the Turning Point group that started. And, on top of that, you've got all these kids that are being, kind of rounded up in terms of, getting to think of certain philosophy. And I think it's great. I think the overall mission, like Charlie Kirk going out and debating people, I think that was good. I think the mobilization of young people into going, hey, if we go socialist, there's no turning back from this. It doesn't just, it's a 50-year cycle to get out of it if you're lucky. And you're going to live like serfs, and there probably will be no way coming back from it. And if our country falls, the rest of the world falls. So I think kind of putting that on some of these younger kids made them conservative. But and then at the same time, you get Charlie Kirk, you've got the economy that hasn't really fixed itself and stabilized, although there's some action pointing that way that some of these things are going to be long term, but they're not going to. You're not turning a bicycle, you're turning a giant barge, and it takes a while. So you've got these two things. So you've got this captured group of people who are being told to be, we need to have Israel as our partner, pro-Israel. And then you look at what is Israel? Well, Israel is basically our, a lot of people think, Israel runs us. And I think they have some influence on us. But I think at the end of the day, we're giving them money and they're basically just buying our weapons. So it's not, it's sort of like a continuation of the military industrial complex. Now we've got this place that we could stick a group of people, after World War II that nobody likes in that region. So we have to keep building more things to protect them with, and they'll buy our things and they'll create their own Western society, which is good. We want to see a Western society in there. But also, I mean, since I was a kid, I've been hearing about the freaking Palestinians and the Jews fighting each other. At some point, I just like, I don't care. You guys go kill each other. I don't care. Because you don't want to get along. Neither side wants to get along for some reason. And there's a reason for that. And is it the military industrial complex just wanting to keep their businesses going? I don't know. That could be one thing. But then on the other end, when I think it kind of picked up probably when those assassinations occurred in like the Munich Olympics, and they killed some of and then they went out and went after the assassins there. And I think that probably started the culture of, oh, this is a good way to get back at people. And they've probably been doing it before that, but I think at that point, it kind of went into overdrive. It kind of was their 9/11 moment that they got, oh, now we can have like, instead of like 10 assassin groups, we can have 50 assassin groups, one in each country. Oh, and now we can create more corporations in other countries and go there because we're kind of like citizens of the world. We don't really have allegiance to any country, so we can go into anything and just exploit what they're doing. And I think overall, the Israel's been really good at that. But then, you look at the cartels. The cartels do the same thing. You go to El Paso, I would say probably 40% of the businesses are cartel owned and run, and they're just fronts for other things. You look at our CIA, they do the same thing. Well, where does all that come from? That comes from Britain. So it's really these predator class peoples, which, Israel's definitely one of them. But like in Britain and then South America, you've got these cartels, and they're all kind of basically just wanting to grab resources for themselves, and not have any accountability. And that's at the end of the day. None of these people want accountability. They want to be able to operate and do whatever they want. And so they see a guy like Kirk that can turn people their way, and they're like, "Yeah, we like him. This is a great guy. We're going to fund him and get him going." And they create this behemoth that's just it's a river of money just flowing, and people are looking at it going, "Shit, we should get some of this money. So let's create another business. Let's create an endowment and invest in the stock market." And they're making over $1 million a year in funds coming back from their investments. And I don't see anything wrong with them creating a fund to invest in things, because that's something that all these giant groups do. It is a little icky, and being a nonprofit and just contributing to. There's a bunch of stuff that I think you're going to see in their financials, which, at the end of the day, it's mainly Israeli money and then small donors. But the big donors, I think, are Israeli, that he mentions a lot. But what does all this mean? You go back to Crooks. Well, Crooks was a guy on the right. Okay, this Robinson guy, so who I don't think had much to do with. I don't think he was a trigger man at all. But here's a guy who comes from a right family, from the right. But then they both have this point where they change, which I guess happens around uh, the COVID lockdowns, where everybody's looking at their phones and they're being programmed. Hey, it's pretty cool to dress up like a furry and have sex. It's pretty cool to be trans. So you got these impressionable kids who are just getting out of high school around that age. They're kind of trying to find, what am I going to do for the rest of my life, is basically what they're asking. And they're going, hey, look, don't be, this is avant-garde. This is cool. This is edgy. You could do this. And so then at some point, maybe they get targeted through a Discord chat or something. And because you see Crooks, they see his online messages, and all of a sudden this guy starts contacting him who seems to be in the same framework, named Willie Tepes, and then he goes dark. And then he, kills his accounts, which would probably, at that point, I think he's in with an FBI informant or someone in the FBI. That's what I think. And I think the same thing with Robinson. But his could be CIA. I think CIA and FBI have programs where they keep these guys. They're feeding them along, and when they need them to operate, they have a plan in action, and it might be 4 to 5 people that come in and help this person do something. And honestly, I think Crooks was probably going to just set off some pipe bombs or whatever the bombs he had near a gas main, which is where he had his car parked, which would have made sense. Have that go off, a big explosion. The CNN cameras are there to get Trump going like this. Oh, and then they can show this picture of Trump acting scared. I don't think the shooting thing was part of the deal, but they had to clear the cops out of there for this pipe bomb guy to come in. And I think him on his own was like, you know what, I'm going to shoot this guy. I'm going to do it. I think that could be one of the possibilities. Or maybe he was going to go there to shoot him the whole time. And then maybe, but I don't think he was the lone shooter either. So, maybe he was there to have that bomb thing go off, and then they were going to shoot the president. But then he just started shooting, because at the end of the day, they didn't hit him. And you look at what they did to Charlie. They hit Charlie, from wherever that shot came from, it hit its mark and did its damage. So I think Crook somehow screwed the plan up, probably from overthinking it or getting involved. Or it's like, I'm going to get up there and take the shot. Because you go up there, how's that building out of the cordon zone? Nobody's watching it. So there's a lot of weird stuff, but then there's a window that overlooking it that guys could have been watching him from there. And maybe they let him take the shot, or maybe, there's a lot of weirdness going along with both of them, but I think they are both related. And I think it's, at the end of the day, I think you're going to find out it's government. Are these government agents working for someone else? Totally. Could be. Could have rogue people. I know there's a thing on No Agenda. They talk about the 6-week cycle, where every 6 weeks the FBI thwarts a terror attack. And so they could come in and be the saviors, but always in the fine print, he was talking to an FBI informant. And there's, the FBI knew of this from blah, 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 from online chatter they've been monitoring. So they know all these things are going on, and then they just use them to their advantage to keep their budget up. Because I don't think, at the end of the day, I don't think most Muslims want to kill Westerners. I don't think most, you know, lefties want to kill people on the right. I think most of the time, most people want to get along. They get pressured into doing this stuff and goaded, and you find people who are unstable. You fill them with drugs, and then you got your Manchurian candidate. And I think that's something they've been perfecting for a while. Now you got the phone where it's easy to get messages into people's brains. So it's not going to get easier. I don't think it's going to get a lot harder. But I don't know. But yes, I think they're all related, and I think it's all part of all types of predators are involved in this, and Israel's one of those predator classes. So,
Well, that's a valid point, and something that I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves is that there's a lot of people who gain from these things, and sometimes it's not just one person or one group, and
yeah,
a lot of people might be in on something because they're all gaining from it. It's like you talked about with the military industrial complex, like they might just be one of the many people who want to keep these wars going due to their financial gain. After World War One, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, when they carved up the Middle East,
hmm
they purposely created countries that were never there, with people that shouldn't be in one country together, and they knew wouldn't get along, so they could always justify getting involved, right? And then
yeah.
there's other people who gain from that, So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's usually much more complex than it's just all one person. It's like growing up, you'd always hear like you had the group of people who thought it was always the Jews, and then you had the people who thought it was never the Jews. I'm like, well, maybe the answer lies somewhere in the middle, and it's not even the other thing too is that, and I think it's important to clarify, is that a lot of times people think like when you're talking about Mossad, you're talking about Israel, like you're talking about the Jewish people. You're not. It's
No,
no different than when you talk about Bush and September 11th. Like you're not saying that the American people who live in that country are responsible and guilty for all the war crimes of Dick Cheney and Bush and whatnot. So it's like, I think sometimes people do get emotional. They think, and I get it, because historically, you look at World War II, and you look at like, just historically, the fear of like, history repeating, or, like they say,
yeah.
rhyming, something similar happening, where you get a justification to dislike the Jews and make them seem like the other, right? And it's like, if you're of Jewish descent, if you come from a family that shared these tragic stories of everybody turning on the your people, like, hey, you
hmm
know what? Like, I can understand why you'd be afraid of people now pointing the finger at Mossad, talking poorly of Bibi Netanyahu, talking poorly of Israel, this and that. Now, little by little, maybe you start getting concerned that, like, okay, is this a slippery slope to some anti-Jewish movement that, so, and that's the thing. That's why,
And
like,
and the Jews could want this too, to so they could play the victim again. So they could be fomenting this. And I say the Jews, it could, Israel, whatever. They could be going, hey, we want to create this situation, so then we can go in and control things. Like, oh, now we're in control. Now, we have TikTok, and we can put these, things in TikTok where people can't say anything negative about Israel anymore. And there's a lot of there's plenty of shit to go around with these people. But at the end of the day, it's predators that want to keep us from having, unlimited energy, and they want to control people, and they want to cull the population. Those are the three things that these people want to do to us. And when I say these people, I mean these, you know, uh, I guess they come from Egypt, back in the day. So
no, you're right. I mean,
yeah.
you see it with Hamas and the funding, Bibi Netanyahu and Israel, like admitting that they funded Hamas. You look at October 7th, and the possibility that they let it happen, to let to kind of paint them as the victims, and then justifying all the things that came afterwards, right? And so, this idea of like, hey, maybe they do want this, because now it kind of paints them as the victim, so they can justify more things that they want to do, then yeah, I mean, that's possible because that's kind of what they did with October 7th. Like they took a horrific event and then either let it happen or whatever, but one thing we know for sure is that they took a horrific event and used it to justify much more and many more horrific events that they did. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I mean, you
They
can't.
went to ludicrous speed.
Yeah, and they use that event to justify it. No different than like
Hmm.
we took September 11th, a horrific event, and then invaded a bunch of countries that had nothing to do with it. But because everybody was so up in arms and angry and emotional, right? And that's a big part of the tactic is like, hey, when people are emotional, when people are afraid, people don't remember. But like at that time, you had code orange, code red, code this. They wanted to keep everybody just like, just in fear mode all the time to make us feel like, hey, please, big brother, give us a solution to fix this because I just want my life back and I don't want to be afraid to go to a mall or go to a public place or whatever, or to go on a plane or whatever. And then that leads to, to TSA, that leads to this and that, and a loss of freedoms for, of course, like security and like that famous.
Well, and that's a bigger thing. The whole living in fear and living in anxiety, that's what a lot of these entities want you living in because then you're putting out a low vibration and you're not picking up and seeing, all the goodness that's going on in life. 'Cause there's a lot of good things going on out in the world. And if you're just focused on the negative and the low vibrational stuff, well, then you're just going to be a low vibrational person. And I'm not saying everything's great, I'm definitely not saying that, but I'm saying you have to have a balance. You can't just be looking at the negative all the time. You have to have something to offset that to give you perspective to go, well, you know, Trump's sending carriers down to Venezuela. Well, we're in another war. That's it. Well, we're not in another war yet. It hasn't happened yet, and it could just be a show of strength to to go after this guy who may or may not be involved in screwing up our election system. So I think the drug things are kind of a red herring because we don't see a lot of drugs coming out of Venezuela. But that's also he could be fucking with the Europeans because that's where the drugs are going that are being shipped out of there. They're going to the Caribbean to be put on British boats to be shipped to Europe. And people don't realize that. Like Trump could just be messing with their money laundering right now. Because they're trying to screw him. He's like, you're going to screw me, I'm going to screw you. So we don't even know the whole full concept of all these moves that he's making, and some of them are probably good. And overall, and I think at the end of the day, we go, well, let's hope we elected a guy who's not going to screw us. But it's hard. I know it's hard for a lot of people to think that, and they want to jump ship as soon as something doesn't go their way or they don't get immediate satisfaction. But you're never going to get, immediate satisfaction. How long does it take to make a song? It takes a long time. It takes many takes. It takes editing, and then it takes listening to it and then walking away from it and coming back to it and with fresh ears. There's a lot of, and you can use that kind of about world events. Yeah, you can judge a world event how it happens, but as you let things play out, more things start to reveal themselves. You start hearing a bad note here and a weird fudge there, and then it's all started. Oh, okay, now it makes sense, but it takes a while to absorb it all. So, but the position we're kind of in this social media world is we got to be the first to get everything out immediately, and sometimes that's good to get your perspective on it, especially if you're putting a historical perspective on something. But like what Sean Stone said, he said, I don't know, what about this, but historically, these things are not one person. I think, yeah, we're definitely going to find there's people involved, and I think in both those cases, it's going to be federal for some reason, and I don't know how people could do that, but I think there's rogue elements still in our government that are operating, and I think they're going to operate until you really, you got to clean house and clean these institutions, maybe even start them all over, scrap them and start all over. It's been done before, so.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And the thing is, one thing that you hit on that I think is super important is like, and sometimes I kind of talk about this when people talk about some of Alex's kind of, crazy rants. I'm like, listen, if your job is to only highlight, talk about, and concern yourself with the most negative things that are going on in the world all the time,
Yeah.
I'm like, you're going to lose your shit from time to time. I know people who
Yeah.
work in jails and prisons who talk about how their whole worldview, how their whole, emotions and everything gets fucked up from working there. Because it's like the way you perceive things, the way you perceive people, because you're
Hmm.
only around the worst of the worst people all the time. So, and then you forget that that's an isolated sample size of of humanity, of humans, that there's a lot
Right.
of good people out there, right? And during COVID and during, I mean, just life in general, like I always talk about, like how important it is to like you said, step away and do things you love. I just started doing music again because I'm using uh art. I call it the gap. The gap is your imagination, the song that's in your head, and then creating it. And the gap in between has shrinking due to artificial intelligence and
Hmm.
all the stuff that you can use now online. And so I started kind of releasing music again because now that gap is much smaller. I'm like you, I don't have a whole lot of free time. I coach my kids in basketball. We just actually have basketball practice tonight. I coach them in soccer. I love those kind of known for their soccer. Where I think we have the most Division I high school state champs in all of Massachusetts, which is pretty impressive because we're a small little town of immigrants. But we're just a strong soccer heritage and history here. Uh, but
Oh, you
doing
froze there for a second.
oh, sorry. Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
doing these things are really important. Doing spending time with your friends, spending time with your family, disconnecting. Right. It's something
Yeah.
that James Corbett and I have always talked about. We've been talking for a long time, and he was one of my first guests on the show in 2013 or whenever it was. And I remember we laughed about how little fucks our wives care about what we do. Like they just don't care at all. And at first you almost like want your wife to be excited about the thing that you're doing. It's like, hey, I'm getting Justin Ventura on the show, or hey, Jim Brewer's
Yeah.
on the show.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, well, did you take out the trash? Did you start the
Right.
grill? Like, it's like
Yeah.
and it's like, okay. At first, I'm like, I wanted to be like excited, like the way I'm excited about these shows and these interviews and whatever. And then in time, you're like, you know what? It kind of keeps me balanced, like just getting away from it.
Yeah.
If I had a wife who cared this much about the things that I care about, and we were constantly talking about it, I'd probably be like severely, chronically depressed all the time, and I would just be in a dark hole that I could just
And angry. You'd
and
be angry.
angry. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do,
Yeah.
do you?
No, it doesn't.
How do
Yeah,
you?
I learned many years ago. I had to have a little bit of a respite, which is why I do the little Grunion show, which I'm working on season 4 right now, the little puppet show, just because it gives me a break. It's still production work, but it's like it's fun production work. It's not serious, and the world won't end if I don't get it right, you know. So, hey, with that, I got to go. They're calling my name out there. I hear
Yeah.
my name being. No one
Sorry.
knows where I'm at either. No one knows I'm in here. So, where's
Sorry,
Dew?
Rob.
Where's Dew? I keep hearing where's Dew out in the hall. So, I'm
Hey,
gonna
great.
run. But it was great. It was great being on the show and talking with you. I hope people enjoy this and spread it around because talking is way better than fighting at this point. And I've done both, and it's better to be talking.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely. Let hopefully we talk again in the near future. I'd love to talk about some of your musical influences, some of the music you were into. I've had Burton C. Bell from Fear Factory and others on the show, and tons of great. I love just having those conversations
Sure.
about with
Yeah,
art.
yeah, we'll definitely
Other
talk. We can do a whole thing on music because I've gone full circle. I like to slap the bass. So,
things. Awesome. Well, thank
all
you,
right.
Rob. Hey, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule, and we'll talk again
Yep.
in the future. Thanks.
All right, brother. Have a good one.
Hey, you too. Take care.